Welcome to Adventures in Freeze Drying. Today we are going to freeze dry caramel M&Ms. These are one of my favorite things freeze dried. I actually don't care for them not freeze dried if they're the wrong caramel for me. So as far as the candies go, this is the cat's meow. That being said, before we go set up our machine and get these ready, there's a couple things that we need to discuss. On the back of every food bag, we know there's the ingredients, but it also tells you the allergens. And this says contains milk and soy and may contain peanuts. This is a situation where if you are selling candy, you need to think about this, because unless you do a very thorough cleaning and sanitation job, not just sanitizing, but you got to really get in there and scrub the nooks and crannies, you can potentially contaminate other foods with peanut oils, which could be very, very dangerous. So if you have a business and multiple machines, I would have one machine that ever runs your chocolate stuff that could contain your peanuts, your tree nuts, that type of stuff. I think that's super important. Not all of us have that. We only have one machine. So it is super important that you are using soap, like Dawn dish soap, blue soap and water, and scrubbing, getting to the nooks and crannies, get out that toothbrush to get into those crevices on your rack especially. Super important, especially if someone in your family has that allergy. If someone in your family doesn't have that allergy and you're not going to be selling your candy, not as big a deal. But allergies are nothing to joke around with. And if you're selling candy, you need to consider those things before you ever run something with the peanut in it. When I am getting ready to run, especially my chocolate candies, I like to do my caramel M&Ms first. So that way, it's not necessarily that I warm the caramel M&Ms as much as I allow them to come to temperature with the machine. So the first thing I need to do is customize. And I run all of my chocolate candies at 135. So once it says 135, I leave my extra dry time at 24 hours. I'm going to go ahead and just hit save. Once I close my machine, I then can hit start and the 15-minute cool down period begins, and that's when I go ahead and tray my candy up. I always put parchment down underneath my chocolate candy simply because it's just very messy to do. It is important also that you do not overfill your trays. It's so tempting to just dump these on, but because these expand, they will stick to each other. So you don't want to overload this. You want to get them spread out. And that is all I'm going to put on this medium tray. I am not going to overload this tray. And then we'll go ahead and get my other 3 trays filled quickly. So on my 4 medium trays, I got 1 and probably 2/3 bags of caramel M&Ms spread out on the 4 trays of my medium machine. For moving stuff around, I do love my stackers from freezedryingsupplies.com. They lock in place on the corners so they're stable, they're not going anywhere. And when you get your trays in, they're all locked in place and they're super duper stable, which makes it much easier to carry things up and down stairs and things like that. So let's go ahead and head down to the freeze dryer and we'll get these going. My machine has done the 15-minute cool off period. The first thing I do is actually go ahead and shut my drain valve so I don't forget to do that. So I've shut my drain valve and we are going to run the candy process. So I'm going to click that to on. Next, I'm going to go ahead and load my M&Ms in kind of carefully. I don't want them to all bunch up together. Take my stackers off as I'm going so stackers don't go into the freeze dryer. Close the door. Make sure you double latch it into place. Click continue. And I'm just going to hit start. And it's going to show a minute of tray warming time, which is fine. What that allows is for the machine and my trays to come up to 135 and then start. I'm not warming them at 135 for an extended amount of time. I have just found with the caramel M&Ms, this tends to get me the best results. It's been about 4.5 hours since we put our caramel M&Ms in. As you can see, they look quite different than we first put them in. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this load. We're going to get these out and let them sit for about 15 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and get those packaged up. When I am storing candy, I like to use dry and dry. It's a desiccant. It is not an O2 absorber. So that is not what it is doing. This is simply going to be a desiccant. It is doing just moisture. My candy is not intended for long term. I'm using it for get-togethers, tailgates, things like that. So it doesn't necessarily need the O2 anyways. So I like to put that in the bottom of the container and then just pick these up and put these in a deli container. Sometimes you have to break some of these M&Ms apart. Let's see if I can't show you some that need to be broken apart here. They come apart fairly easy at this stage. They're still a little warm, but they're not so gooey. And you'll just break them apart and put them in your container. But I like to store these in the deli containers because they are a little delicate and I don't want them to get smashed. So from 1 2/3 or 1.5 bags of caramel M&Ms, I have 5 completely full 32-ounce deli containers of them freeze-dried. And this one's, I don't know, 4/5 of the way full, 7/8. It needs a few more in it. But these were all of my duds. And my duds, I've learned I do all save up. And when I have 2 trays that I can run along with something else that I need to run that has the peanut issue with it, I will go ahead and run those. And usually about 50% of these, sometimes 75%, will go ahead and freeze dry for me. And then I'll fill up the rest of that container and whatnot. So just know that you're going to have some duds with caramel M&Ms, and that is normal. And what is the point of one of these videos if I don't tell you how wonderful these are? They become light, fluffy, and almost melt in your mouth caramel with some chocolate stuck to it, but you still have the hard candy shell that will crunch. So you get both the light and fluffy and the crunch, making these absolutely delightful. These are by far one of my favorite candies freeze-dried. Give them a try if you haven't, and join me next time on Adventures in Freeze Drying.